Chapter 1, Antagonism and Contrition. 368-20. 20. Chapter 1, Antagonism and Contrition. Tension. That was the only word to describe the feeling in the air between the two golden retriever twins as they made their way down the street to their house in their halves of their power-split vehicle, neither of them saying a single Chapter 1, Antagonism and Contrition. That was the only word to describe the feeling in the air between the two golden retriever twins as they made their way down the street to their house in their halves of their power-split vehicle, neither of them saying a single word. Usually, they were always in a good mood, chatting, laughing, and got along very well with each other. However, it was the complete opposite this time. The reason there was tension in the air was because the twins had failed at a mission. That mission being stopping the ladybird, a villain who loved to steal anything she saw that was shiny. Ever since they joined the PAW patrol and became mighty pups and earned their superpowers, Ella having the power to grow and Tuck having the power to shrink down to the size of an ant, they would always foil the ladybird's evil plot and save the day. But this time, however, Ladybird had managed to get away. The twins, along with the mighty pups, were on a mission to try and retrieve a shiny, golden statue that the ladybird had stolen from the Adventure Bay Museum. The statue was very important because it was Mayor Goodway's great-great-great-great-grandfather, Grover Goodway, the very first mayor of Adventure Bay. It was a huge part of the town's history, and if anything were to happen to it, it would be a catastrophe. The ladybird had superpowers that gave her the ability to fly just like a bird, and super strength, which is how she managed to steal the statue. She lifted it as if it were a feather, just like that. Mayor Goodway witnessed the theft, and called the PAW patrol to help get it back. Hearing that the ladybird was behind the crime, he called Ella and Tuck to join along on the mission. But alas, the statue wouldn't be coming back to the museum that day. The mighty twins had failed. Failed really badly. As they were chasing the ladybird, Tuck came up with the idea of using his shrinking powers and sneak onto the ladybird and make her drop the statue from her hands. But Ella was skeptical about his plan, and told him that they should try having her block Ladybird's way with her giant powers. But Tuck told Ella that they could go along with both of their plans, Tuck shrinking down to ant size and riding a giant Ella, who would block the ladybird while Tuck jumped onto her without being seen and kicking the statue right from her grasp. Ella was still a bit hesitant, but she finally gave in and told Tuck to hop on as she grew to her giant size. The ladybird was certain she had finally gotten away from the mighty pups, but all her hopes were crushed when a giant Ella appeared right in front of her, blocking her way, startling her. But what the twins didn't know was that Ladybird could see Tuck on Ella's head, even though he was tiny. She knew what they were planning, and she smirked as she saw Tuck pounce from Ella to her. But Tuck wouldn't even make it to the statue. Ladybird, watching Tuck's moves, made perfect contact as she slapped hard him in mid-air with her left hand, sending him flying down towards the forest as his screams echoed throughout the air. Gasping, Ella dashed to where Ladybird had slapped Tuck to try and catch him. This was the perfect opportunity for Ladybird to make her escape. Right when Ella turned and ran to catch her brother, Ladybird took off as fast as she ever flew away from the twins until she had lost them. Ella rushed as quickly as she could to her falling little brother. Thankfully, she managed to get under him just in time to catch him on her back. As Tuck hopped off of her back and onto the ground, they grew and shrunk back to their normal sizes. You'll also like 1.1K38. Everest finds Marshall very upset due to how the events have affected him, and the only thing that is standing in his way was her warm heart red heart. But there's a very emotion. 67.8K733. It has been a while since the PAW patrol pups have been on a mighty mission, and the pups were used to doing their normal rescues, but what happens when all of the 12K481. Complete. Ryder is a teenaged boy in foster care. His parents died when he was 2 and was put into the foster system. He has bounced from one home to another. Either H. 347K 15.2K. And quote, I know I'm a monster, but even I have my limits, and quote, I shouted him. He shouldn't have done that. And quote, wait, please, let me explain. I'm sorry dash and quote, end quote. 5.9K 68. When a young rockruff arrives in a completely different world, she is hunted down by every threat Matthew, Champ, and the Paw Patrol have faced so far. Matthew must be W. Tuck had mixed emotions of sadness and embarrassment on his face, but he still thanked his sister for saving his life. At first, Ella was happy that Tuck was safe and sound. But the expression on her face turned to a look of exasperation as she started to chew him out for not letting her go with her idea by herself because she knew how risky Tuck's was. Tuck was taken aback by his sister's sudden change in emotion. She had never scolded him before. Usually, she would kind and forgiving whenever he did something wrong. But today, it seemed like, wasn't one of Ella's kind and forgiving moments. Tuck, hurt and angered by his sister's words, became defensive and snapped back at her that he didn't intend to mess up on purpose, and that she should have picked a better spot on Ladybird for him to jump on without her spotting him. This caused an argument to break out between the siblings, which caught the attention of the other mighty pups, who were surprised by the sight of the twins bickering, because they got along very well and never argued and fought. The PAW patrol were so caught up in trying to stop the argument that they didn't notice that the Ladybird had already managed to make her escape. After the quarrel was put to a stop, everyone turned to their heads in the direction the Ladybird was flying, only to let out shocked gasps when they saw that she was nowhere in sight. They searched all around the area to try and find any sign of the villain. But they found nothing. The Ladybird had finally won. She had gotten away, and the twins had let it happen. It was then that Ryder insisted that the twins go home and cool off, and that they would search for Ladybird themselves. The twins started to protest against this, but they knew arguing with their leader wasn't going to make things easier, so they both just gave a small smile and nodded reassuringly. But deep down they were both still cross, and glared slightly at each other. Now they were out of their super suits and making their way back home. Ella, however, drove her vehicle in front of Tuck, who was driving his vehicle a good distance from her. They were still angry at each other, and refused to speak or drive beside each other. Today had been a very bad day, and the twins knew that things were going to get a lot worse at home. Pulling into the driveway of their house, they saw that their owner Lydia's car was gone. They knew that she wouldn't be home for a while because she had told them that she had a lot of errands to run. After parking, the twins turned off their vehicles and got out of them and slowly made their way to the doggy door at the front of the house, Ella's expression being that of exasperation as Tuck had his head tilted down and glared at the ground as he walked. As they walked, the tension between them grew and grew with each step they made. But when they entered the house, Tuck decided that fighting over a minor thing was pointless, and wanted to talk to her and try to work things out. Sure, the statue was very important to Adventure Bay. Arguing over a plan to try and stop the Ladybird gone awry? What good was that going to do? Tuck deep a breath, letting his anger subside so he could calm down a bit. Then he began. Ella, he started. Look. I know that things didn't work as we hoped, and we're both mad at each other about it, but don't you think that he didn't even get to finish his sentence as Ella stopped and furiously turned around to face her brother, a snarl etched on her face as she yelled at him. This is all your fault. Huh? Tuck stopped what he was saying and stared at his sister in shock. Excuse me? I said, this is all your fault, Tucker. Ella repeated, using Tuck's full first name. The only time she called him Tucker, which was Tuck's full first name, but he preferred to just be called Tuck, was whenever she was angry or upset with him, which was relevant to the situation they were in now. Tuck continued to stare into his sister's cold blue eyes before he felt the anger consume him all over again, making him forget what he was about to say to her. He just wanted to try to talk things over and make amends, but she was blaming him for all of this? That was just way below the belt. My fault? My fault, he growled, a snarl appearing on his face, as well. You think this is all my fault? I already told you, I didn't mess up on purpose. How was I supposed to know the ladybird was going to see me even though I was the size of an ant? You should have chose someone else on her to jump. Ella retorted. But no, you had to take the risky way and nearly get yourself killed. Some hero you are. Tuck's fur bristled as he let out a growling, before saying, you should have just let the situation slide, but no, he mocked his sister, you just had to make a big fuss over it. I understand that you're worried for my safety, but you don't have to get pissed off and scream at me. You should be glad you had someone there to save your butt from nearly getting killed. You should be thankful you have a sister there to protect you from bullies and harm. Ella shouted. Ever since Mom and Dad died, we promised to take care of each other and watch each other's backs, even when Lydia adopted us. But now. Ella sighed bitterly before looking down at her front paws and muttering something that Tuck wasn't sure if he heard correctly. What did you say? Tuck demanded. Ella furiously shot her head up with a loud growl and yelled, I said, I'm starting to regret that promise. I should have just let you fall all the way down to the ground instead of catching you on my back. Tuck was stunned. What do you? He began, but Ella held up her paw to silence him. I'm not finished yet, she said. Tucker. She closed her eyes and sighed before opening them and glaring at her twin again. Sometimes I wish. She stopped again. You wish what? Ella sighed again. Sometimes I wish I were an only pup. Tuck's eyes went wide. Huh? What do you mean, you wish you were an only pup? Tell me, Ella. What do you mean? He shouted that last sentence. I'm saying I wish that you were never born with me. Ella exploded, which made Tuck jump back at the volume of her voice. Life would be a whole lot better if you never existed. 2. Silence. Tuck felt like he had been shot straight in the heart when she said those words. He never expected his sister, his own flesh and blood, to wish something so offensive as wishing he was never born, let alone wishing that he never even existed. Tuck felt his legs become weak as he stared at his sister, who was taking deep breaths after her tirade. He felt tears brimming his eyes as his anger turned into anguish as he mewled. Ella, you don't really mean that, do you? Tuck whimpered. A tear trickled down his cheek, showing that his sister's words had severely and verbally hurt him. Ella saw the tear sliding down his cheek. Deep down, she knew that what she had said to him was way below the belt, and she regretted it. She didn't mean to make him cry, but she was so angry that she couldn't think clearly and apologize to him. It was like a demon had possessed her and taken control of her mind and hurling awful insults. She saw Tuck wipe his eyes with his paw as he sniffled as she heard the faint sound of his shaky breath as he let the tears flow. In the back of her mind, Ella thought, oh, no, what have I done? I said such awful things and made my own brother cry. Why did I have to go and say something like that? I'm not that type of pup. I need to calm down and give him a hug and apologize. But her strong emotions prevented her from doing that. Instead, her glare deepened as she said, Tucker, look at me. She pointed her paw to her face. Do I look like I didn't mean it? You know, you really are a thorn in my side sometimes. Now leave me alone and don't talk to me. Then she turned around and finished that with a loud humph. Then she began to walk away, leaving her crushed twin brother in a pool of tears. Then, Tuck felt something inside of him. It felt like a small flame had been lit inside of his chest. Then it began to grow bigger and bigger, brighter and brighter as he gnashed his teeth and a growl began to form in his throat. And like the flame, the growl grew bigger and bigger, louder and louder as he locked eyes on his sister walking away. It was as if his vision went completely red, like a bull whenever it saw a matador's red cape in a bullfighting event, and like the cape, Ella was his target. Ella. You bitch. He thought furiously. After all I've done for you, you decided to thank me by crossing the line and wishing I was never born. Saying that your life would be better if I didn't exist. Well, let me you tell something, Missy. You've gone too far this time. And now you have to pay the price. I'm gonna make you suffer. 1. Rayarg. Without thinking, Tuck let out an enraged cry as he charged towards his sister like a cheetah chasing its prey. Ella didn't have time to turn around as she felt Tuck knock her down to the floor at full force. She let out a cry of surprise and pain as she hit her head hard against wall and fell back onto her back, putting her paws over her throbbing forehead as a scream of agony came out of her mouth. But once she was able to uncover her head and open her eyes to see surroundings, she stopped and stared in front of her. Then, a look of horror crossed her face as she made out who was in front of her. There, standing right above her was Tuck, a look of hate-filled rage on his face, nostrils flaring with each heavy, hot breath he took, his teeth gnashed so hard, it was as if they could break at any moment. Ella could swear when she looked into Tuck's eyes, she thought she could see fire in them. Like some sort of demon had taken control of him and turned him into a maniac. That's how terrifying the look on his face was. Ella continued to stare at her brother as tears began to form in her eyes. Tears of fear and shock. "TT Tuck, what are you doing?" she whimpered. "Shut up," Tuck said in a low voice, a voice filled with malice. Ella continued to whimper, and she tried to say something, but it only angered Tuck even more, causing him to raise his paw and strike her hard across the face. Ella let out a squeal as she took her paws off of her forehead, which revealed a huge bruise on the spot where it had hit the wall and covered her nose, which was now bleeding from the strike. "TT Tuck, please, sto-. I said shut up." Tuck screamed in her face. "Shut up. Shut up. Shut up." He stamped his paw on her head repeatedly, matching the number of times he yelled those last words. With each blow, Ella's painful screams became louder and louder, as the blood coming from her nose poured out quicker, and tears began pouring down her face. She could taste iron in her mouth, and she knew that Tuck had managed to knock some of her teeth out from how hard he was hitting her. 1. Tuck stopped hitting her and lowered his face close to her now bleeding and battered, tear-stained face, and, with that malice-filled voice, he spoke. "How dare you? All our life we've watched each other's backs and took care of each other. Who's the one that stands up for you whenever someone picks on you? Me. Who's the one that helps you out whenever you're in a difficult situation? Me. Who's the one that loved you and stuck by your side ever since our parents died? Me. I was there for you your entire life. I cared for and loved you ever since we lost our parents. And. Another tear rolled down Tuck's face, despite the rage on his face, as he remembered the day his and Ella's parents tragically perished, but he quickly wiped the tear away with his paw and continued glaring down at his battered twin. Tuck continued, "And what thanks do I get for doing all that? Huh? Do you know, Ella? Oh, I know. You told me that you wished I weren't born with you. In fact, to add insult to injury, you said life would be better if I never existed. That hit way below the belt." Tuck closed his eyes and turned his head to the right. He clenched his jaw tight, his nostrils flaring quickly with each hot breath he took, as he felt his blood pressure rise even higher. Then, he gnashed his teeth and turned back to Ella, pure bloodlust showing in his eyes as he growled. "You know, Ella," Tuck began, "I thought you were always there for me. But no. You just had to throw it all away, didn't you?" He raised his paw in the air, signaling that he was about to strike her again. "And now, you must pay the price." 1. Before Tuck could bring his paw down, Ella mustered the strength to lift her own paw and strike Tuck in the face. Tuck let out a cry of surprise, stumbling back a few inches and falling over, giving Ella the opportunity to make her escape. Despite the intense pain all over her body, Ella managed to pull herself up off the ground and started running towards the doggy door. She let out a small cry as she limped with each step she took, causing her to not run as fast as she could. Tuck rubbed his cheek. He could taste iron in his mouth and knew his mouth was bleeding. "Why you?" he growled, turning his head in the direction his sister was running. He charged after her, his speed far faster from Ella's injured state. Ella beeped her pup tag, frantically calling Ryder for help. "Ryder! It's Ella! Please! You have to help me! Tuck's gone crazy! He's going to kill," but before she could finish her sentence, Tuck pounced on her from behind, knocking her to the floor and pinning her. "Plus. Where do you think you're going, sister?" said Tuck, ending that last word with a tone of intense spite. Then, Tuck raised his head down to his sister's neck and wrapped his teeth around her collar. Then, with a quick jerk, he ripped the collar off of her neck and held it in his teeth. Ella could only stare and cry as her brother spit out her collar on the floor. "Now, to make sure you can't call for help," Tuck said. He raised his right paw and, with a ferocious cry, he swiftly brought his paw down and stomped down hard on the tag on her collar. Then he stomped on it again. And again. And again. He kept stomping on it until the logo on the tag was completely shattered, making it unable to contact Ryder or any other of the PAW patrol. Ella could only sob as she watched Tuck's maniacal behavior. She couldn't move, the pain from Tuck tackling her made it excruciating. Tuck stared down at the destroyed pup, inhaling and exhaling rapidly from stomping on it repeatedly. Then, he looked at his sister, and, despite the pain, Ella could her blood freeze when her eyes caught his. That cold, scary glare, Ella could see, was something she had never seen on Tuck before. It was as if he was different pup, like he had been possessed by some sort of evil spirit, and the good Tuck was trapped behind an invisible wall in his brain, banging his paws on the wall, yelling and pleading to be let out and take control of himself again. But the spirit was too strong. Ella watched as Tuck walked towards her, the scary glare still on his face. "Gee, get away from me, you maniac!" Ella cried, trying to scoot away, but failing because of the pain. Tuck ignored her, and continued making his way toward her, then stopped and glared down at her. Ella was now sobbing uncontrollably. Half of it being from the pain, and the other being out of fear for her life. "T, Tuck," Ella said through her tears. "I am sorry, Tuck. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean what I said. I was just so mad that I wasn't in the right state of mind. Please. Have mercy. I'm so sorry. I love you." This only added more fuel to Tuck's ire, as he bared his teeth and growled, then he screamed with hot tears rolling down his cheeks, "If you really did love me, you wouldn't have said the things you've said. After everything I've done for you, you've just decided to throw all that down the fucking drain. You. Tuck stopped and closed his eyes as he remembered the words Ella had insulted him with. "Life would be a whole lot better if you never existed." While those words echoed in his head, Tuck gritted his teeth even harder to the point where they could have cracked, and his growl growing louder as he felt the rage inside of him rise over its limit. "Rayarg!" With another cry of fury, he quickly bit down hard into the side of Ella's neck, but all she could let out was a small squeak, being that she was in too much pain to scream, and the fact that she knew she wasn't going to make it out of this alive. She knew she was going to die, and it would be from her own flesh and blood. Her own brother. Murdered by her twin. Then, with as much force as possible, Tuck yanked his head back and ripped a chunk of flesh out of the side of Ella's throat. Blood immediately started gushing out like a waterfall. There was no doubt that Tuck had bitten down so deep and hard he had dissected her carotid artery. Ella's eyes grew to the size of saucers, as blood had already pooled around her neck down to her waist. Loud gurgles emitted from the golden retriever as she clutched her paws around her throat, gasping hard for air and trying to stop the bleeding. But it was no use. The damage had already been done. At that moment, realizing what he had just done, Tuck gasped and snapped out of his blind rage. He stared at his sister, his face turning from anger into pure shock. No. No, 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 he cried, then ran over to his fallen twin. No. No. Fuck. Damn it. What have I done? 1. He picked up his sister's head in his paws and examined the wound on her neck. Oh, oh, God, he cried, nearly when he saw how serious the wound was. He almost puked at the sight of the gaping, gushing rip was, but he managed to gulp down the rising bile just before it came up. Without thinking, he placed his paw over the wound, trying to apply pressure to it. He knew it wouldn't stop it, but he didn't know what else to do. What could he do? As he held his dying sister, his blonde fur and paws became soaked and red from her blood. Come on, Ella, stay with me. Stay with me, he cried, his voice cracking at the final sentence, tears filling his eyes. Ella could only respond with a gurgle as she drifted in and out of consciousness. She was losing too much blood. Ella. Tuck cried, tears now streaming down his face. Look at me, Ella. Look at me. Everything's going to be okay. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Ella let out another gurgle, then looked at Tuck with her eyes barely open, her vision going blurry every second that passed. Finally, she coughed up a bit more blood before she managed to let out a single word, TT Tuck. Yes, Ella, I'm here. I'm right here. You are not going to die, damn it, you will not die, he cried with a mix of anger and despair. But to his surprise, Ella let out a soft chuckle. Ella? Tuck. Ella began, then she coughed as more blood exited her mouth, droplets of it splattering onto Tuck's face, causing him to flinch a bit. However, he didn't care about that. His sister was dying, and it was all over a stupid situation. After coughing, Ella spoke again, her voice coming out choked and whispered, Tuck, why did you have to go and do this to me? Why? Tuck shut his eyes tightly and began sobbing. I don't know, Ella, he said, voice choking as tears poured down his face like raindrops flowing down a window. I was too mad. I couldn't control myself. You said that your life would be better if I didn't exist. It hurt me. That's why I lost it. And now. He sniffled and choked back a sob. Now I hurt you, badly. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Ella's breathing became quicker, tears flowing down her eyes, as well. Oh, Tuck, you know that, I really didn't mean all that, she said, panting after every few words, her voice soft and shrill. I couldn't control myself either. My anger clouded my mind. The words just spilled out. I wanted to take it back, but I wasn't thinking clearly. I'm so sorry, bro. From the bottom of my heart, I really am. It's okay, Ella, Tuck replied. Come on. I can take you to a vet. We can dash. No, Ella replied. It's too late now. I don't have much longer. I've lost a lot of blood. Cough it's all over for me. No. Tuck cried, raising his voice. You are going to make it. Here, let me put on my back dash. He was interrupted by Ella again, this time, she had pressed her blood-soaked paw over his mouth. Stop, she said. It's not worth it. The damage has been done. There's no turning back. She took her paw off of her brother's mouth and placed it on his paw. Please, Tuck. Tell Lydia and the VPAW patrol that I said goodbye and that I love every single one of them. 3. Don't say that, damn it. Tuck screamed, his voice high and shrill from crying. You're not going to die, do you hear me? You're not going to die. 1. Ella could only let out that soft chuckle once again, however this time it was softer than usual. "I'm going to see Mom and Dad again," she said. "We'll finally be together again." Ella coughed once more, then stared at Tuck and gave him a soft smile as she continued. "I hope we'll see each other again soon. Then we'll all be a family again." She raised her paw and wiped a tear off of Tuck's cheek and held it there. "Goodbye, bro, I love you." As she said that, her eyes rolled into the back of her head as her eyelids closed slightly, and her paw began to fall off of Tuck's face before landing limp at her side. The blood stopped pouring out of her neck almost instantly. Her chest stopped rising and falling. Her body lay motionless in Tuck's arms. Tuck's eyes widened as he panicked even more than before. "Ella," he said, hoping the worst hadn't happened. "Come on, this isn't funny. Wake up." She didn't move. Tuck started shaking her at a rapid pace. "Come on, sis, wake up." His voice was even more shrill as the tears poured down uncontrollably. 1. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Wake you up. He grabbed his sister's head and clutched it tightly in his chest in a tight hug, his loud sobs echoing all throughout the house. No matter how hard Tuck tried to get his sister to open her eyes, nothing worked. His sister, his own flesh and blood, the one was always there for him, was dead, and it was all because of him. He was now a murderer. A monster. And a superb baddie. The thing he never thought he would become. The thing he did not want to become. And yet, here he was, having just committed the most heinous, most evil act of all. Tuck prayed that this wasn't really happening. That it was just some horrific fantasy that he had made up in his mind, or a nightmare that he could wake himself up from. However, he wasn't imagining things, nor was he sleeping. It was all real. Ella was dead, and there was nothing he could do about it. All of this because of a simple, stupid argument over something so minor that could be resolved had they worked together. But alas, it was too late. After a few seconds, Tuck pulled his sister's body down gently off of his shoulder and rested her head onto the floor. Through his blurred vision from his tears, he looked into his sister's half-open, lifeless blue eyes. With a choked sob, he lifted his paw to her eyelids and wiped it down to close them. 1. "I'm so sorry, sis," Tuck choked softly. "I love you." Then he shut his eyes and faced the floor as his sobs echoed throughout the house once again. He continued to cry for a few more seconds. But then, a growl started to build in his throat. His muscles tensed as he clenched his teeth tightly. The rage was filling him once again. However, this time, he was angry at himself. Angry for being so selfish during the Ladybird mission. Angry for arguing with his sister over the selfishness that led it up letting Ladybird escape. And, most of all, angry for taking the life of his own flesh and blood. Taking it away so viciously and horrifically. Now he wanted to take it out on everything around him, to hurt himself because he thought he deserved it for what he had done. Erf. Tuck let out another rage-filled cry, this time anguish mixed in his emotions, as he started to bang his head repeatedly on the hardwood floor. He slammed his head over and over again, each hit reminding him more of how much he loathed himself for becoming the polar opposite of what he wanted to become. Finally, he stopped banging his head on the floor, breathing heavily as he placed his paw on it. His head was bruised badly from the repeated blows he gave himself on the floor. It was in so much pain that he knew he had given himself a concussion. But he didn't care. Not one damn bit. He knew he deserved it. He had to punish himself for his horrible deed. He then turned his attention towards the living room couch. Sitting on it were two pillows. A light blue one for him and a red one for Ella. He was targeting his pillow. Growling again, he dashed towards it and pounced onto the couch and grabbed his pillow with his teeth and violently shook it around like a rag doll, the fabric tearing and sending cotton flying all around him. He didn't care about how much of a mess it was making. As long as it was from something of his, he knew that it deserved to be destroyed entirely, since he destroyed something of Ella's her life. After completely ravaging the pillow, Tuck took deep, heavy breaths, staring down at the destruction he had created. Then, the hot, searing rage transitioned into despair, as Tuck mewled and whimpered, feeling more tears fill and leave his eyes. He laid flat on his stomach and covered both of his eyes with his paws, once again filling the entire house with the sound of his agonizing bawling. What have I done? Tuck thought in his grief-stricken mind. I'm a monster. I killed my own sister. I let my emotions take full control of me. What am I going to tell Lydia? What am I going to tell Ryder and the rest of the pups? Everyone's gonna hate me. I don't deserve to breathe the same air as everyone else. I don't deserve to live. Suddenly, his pup tag beeped and a voice came through it. Tuck? Tuck, is everything all right? Our Ryder? Tuck said, trying to mask the shock and trembling in his voice, but not hiding well. What was he calling for? Tuck, Ella called me a while ago screaming, saying that you were going crazy. What's going on? Are you two okay? The golden retriever stayed silent for a few seconds, trying to think of what to say to the boy. Tuck? Oh. Sorry, Ryder. I wasn't paying attention. A voice of concern came through the tag. Tuck, are you okay? You sound like you've been crying. What's going on? Where's Ella? Is she okay? She's fine, he lied. Just had a bit of a quarrel, but everything's all right now. He hated to lie, but what else could he do? He couldn't just come out and tell the kid he had just brutally mauled his sister to death. He just couldn't. Are you sure? Ryder asked. She sounded really frightened when she called me. Yeah, we're doing okay, the retriever replied quickly. He was starting to get annoyed by Ryder's plethora of questions. Ella just decided to calm down by taking a nap. A permanent one, all because of me, he thought. Well, okay, then, Ryder replied, though he was a bit suspicious by Tuck's demeanor, but decided not to press things further. Hey. Guess what? I have great news. Tuck raised his eyebrows slightly. You do? What is it? He didn't really care what it was. He was getting more and more nervous with each passing second the call went. We caught the ladybird. Ryder explained happily. Got the statue back and everything. Tuck honestly didn't know how to react to that statement. Sure, he was happy that Ladybird was caught and the statue was back where it came from. But in the position he was in as of now, he didn't even crack a smile. Oh, that's nice, Ryder. He replied without any emotion. Hey, what's wrong? Ryder asked, concerned. Aren't you happy that we completed the mission? Oh, yeah, of course I am, Tuck replied. But it's just that. He paused and looked down at his bloodied paws. Just what? Ryder replied. It's. Tuck sighed, his mouth trembling as tears threatened to pour down again. It's nothing. Tuck, something is clearly bothering you. You sound like you're about to cry. What did you do? I said, it's nothing, Ryder, Tuck repeated. He could feel anger building up inside him again. Why couldn't Ryder just stop butting in his business and leave him alone? Tuck. Ryder said softly. If there's something you want to tell me, I'm Ryder dash. I said, it's nothing, Ryder. Tuck screamed, interrupting the PAW patrol's leader. Leave me alone. He immediately turned his pup tag off and used his paw to rip the collar off from around his neck. Then, with a cry of rage, he chucked the collar to the floor. He threw it with such force that it bounced and slid a few meters away from him. He walked over to it and realized that the pup tag had a crack going down the middle of it. He gritted his teeth and raised his paw over the tag. Then, like he had done to Ella's tag, he forcefully slammed his paw on it over and over again until it was nothing but tiny pieces of circuits and metal fragments. Adrenaline coursed through Tuck's body. He was breathing heavily, his heart pounding, as he stared down at the remains of his pup tag. Then, he let out a choked sob and began crying once again. He laid on his stomach and covered his eyes with his paws again as the waterworks resumed its cascading down his cheeks. He let out a loud howl of anguish, echoing throughout the entire household. Why? He thought. Why did I have to yell at Ryder? I've become a demon. A wicked, savage demon. I can't live like this anymore. I just can't. Tuck lowered his paws from his red, tear-stained eyes and looked over at his lifeless sister. Or whatever was left of her. The scene was just so brutal. He sniffled and let out some more sobs, as a sudden thought hit his mind. A thought that he knew was awful, but he didn't care. He then began to speak to himself in a shaky voice, it being hoarse from crying. I know what I must do now. Chapter 2, Evocation and Calamity. Lydia Turner hummed to herself as she turned onto the right lane on Cherry Grove Avenue and made her way towards home. She had just finished running her errands for the day and couldn't wait to get home and do some gardening, her favorite pastime, and relax on her hammock and catch up on some reading after she was done. She knew that Ella and Tuck were visiting the PAW patrol for the day, so she decided that she'd take some time to fully re-energize herself by taking a nap in and inhale the fresh, warm spring air. On the way, she picked up some of the twins' favorite pup treats. Bacon-flavored chews for Tuck, and liver sausages for Ella. It was a strong way of showing her love for both of them. They were all that she had. She would be nothing if she hadn't found them as strays when they were just baby pups. She could remember the whole event as if it just happened yesterday. Flashback. About 3 years ago, Lydia was a lonely woman, having lost her husband Tim to a fatal stroke. Lydia was devastated at the loss of Tim, and fell into a deep depression for days. However, one day, she decided that she would take a walk. She thought that instead of using her car, she could stretch her legs and try to relieve some of her grief. It was raining, but she didn't care, she had a coat, boots, and umbrella. When she made it into the city limits of Adventure Bay, she was walking on the sidewalk when all of a sudden, she heard the sound of whimpering coming from a distance in front of her. The whimpering made her stop in her tracks and listened closely. The whining was coming from an alleyway a few feet away from her to the right. Listening more intently, she could hear another whimper coming from the same area. They sounded sad and scared, almost as if they were crying out for help. Curious, she walked up and turned to the alleyway, and what she saw made her gasp, making her heart sink. There was a puppy, a golden retriever, lying under a cardboard box, shivering from the cold rain. Lydia could see tears rolling down its cheeks as it whined and shivered. Seeing this almost made her cry herself. What was this poor little thing doing out in the middle of an all by itself, she wondered. And most importantly, where was its parents? Careful not to scare the puppy, Lydia gently walked up to it. Noticing a presence, the puppy looked up at her. Frightened, it backed away from her and started to growl. Oh, Lydia said, surprised at the pup's sudden change of attitude. She then took another few steps toward the pup and kneeled down to its level. You don't have to be afraid of me. I'm not going to hurt you, Lydia spoke softly to the pup, trying to ease its fear. I'd never hurt even a fly. The puppy stopped growling and stared at Lydia, however it kept a small glare on its face as it was still skeptical about this stranger. Lydia motioned the puppy with her finger and clicked her tongue to try to get it to come to her. Don't be scared, Lydia repeated. I'm the nicest person that can be. Still a bit hesitant, the pup took a few steps toward the human before finally mustering the courage to walk over until she was a few inches from the woman. Lydia looked down at the little retriever. Well, aren't you a cutie? You have the most beautiful blue eyes I've ever seen. And your little pink nose, I've never seen a dog with a pink nose. She took her pointer finger and booped the pup on its nose, causing it to twitch and sniff. You'll also like 12K481. Lydia laughed and reached out for the dog to pick it up. Surprisingly, the puppy allowed the woman to pick her up and hold her. She then began to cuddle the little dog. After a while, the little pup began to smile as she snuggled in the woman's warm embrace. It was first time in a while that she had cracked a smile. Even though she didn't know her, she felt thankful to be held in someone's warm arms. Hey! The heartwarming moment was suddenly interrupted by an angry bark. The two turned their heads toward the direction of the voice. To Lydia's surprise, she saw another golden retriever puppy, this one a male, running towards them, an expression of disdain on his face. What are you doing with my sister? The puppy stopped when he was a few inches from the woman. He glared up at her. Who are you? What do you think you're doing? The puppy looked just like the other Lydia was holding. However, instead of a pink nose, his was dark brown. But he did have the same blue eyes like the other one. Oh my, Lydia said, stunned. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Did the pup just speak? Actual words? You can talk? The retriever's glare darkened. Yeah, I can. So what? That's not important right now. What's important is wondering what you are doing with my sister. Whoa, Tuck, it's okay. She's friendly. Lydia turned to the female pup in surprise. She could talk, too? Maybe she was so overwhelmed with grief from her husband's passing, she was hearing things, she thought. Yeah, that had to be the reason. Animals couldn't talk. It was all just in her head. But that assumption quickly died when the pup in her arms turned to her side and spoke. I'm really sorry about my brother. He's a bit overprotective. Well, my word, Lydia started, I've come across some unbelievable things in my life. But I never expected to meet a talking dog, let alone two of them. I thought I was losing my marbles. She placed the pup down on the ground beside her brother. The male pup surveyed his sister for any signs of abuse. Are you okay, Ella? Did she hurt you? Tuck, I'm fine, the pup named Ella replied back, annoyed, slightly pushing her brother back. I told you she was friendly. Just making sure, sis, Tuck responded. He turned his head toward the woman and scowled. Who are you? What do you want? Tucker. Ella snapped at him. Don't be rude. She turned to the human. I'm sorry about him. He can be a bit of a pain sometimes. Oh, no, that's all right, Lydia replied understandingly. I've met people and animals far worse. I'm Lydia, she introduced herself. And I caught that your name is Ella? Ella nodded. Yes, that's right. She pointed her paw to her brother. And this grump here is Tucker, she said, earning a glare from the male retriever, but he prefers to be called Tuck. Lydia smiled. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you too, she said. Her expression turned into curiosity. I hope that I'm not being too rude to ask, but why does he not want to be called by his full name? Well. Ella hesitated for a moment. Our father's name was Tucker, which means that Tuck's real name is Tucker Jr., but he doesn't really like being called that, he thinks it's silly. Ella turned to Tuck. Sometimes I like to tease him about it, she said, giggling, making Tuck roll his eyes. It's not funny, he grumbled. Lydia chuckled, too, but then her expression turned solemn. Another question, Ella, she said. Ella looked at the woman. Yeah? Lydia was wondering why these two pups were all alone in the middle of an alleyway with no adult retrievers in sight. Well, speaking of your father. She began. Where is he? In fact, where's your mother? Shouldn't they both be here to protect you too from the rain and any other kind of danger? Ella looked down at the ground and sighed sadly. Tuck's face was holding a look of sadness, as well. Lydia could tell by the looks on their faces that what was about to be said wasn't going to be a happy response. She felt her heart break when saw a tear trickle down the retriever's cheek, then sniffled before taking a deep breath before she spoke. We don't have parents anymore." Her voice cracked a bit at the last words. This made Lydia gasp in shock. What do you mean by that? Did they abandon you?" "No." Ella lifted her head up to Lydia's face. Her eyes were now brimming with tears. There. Ella let out a choked sob and began to weep silently. Tears streamed down her cheeks as her eyes shut tightly and her head facing the ground. Her shoulders bobbed up and down with each sobbing breath she let out. Sensing that she was crying, Tuck came up behind his sister and wrapped his paws around her neck and pulled her into a tight embrace. Then he looked up at Lydia. The bitterness and coldness he had towards the woman was now replaced with a look of complete sadness, tears beginning to brim his eyes, as well. Lydia's heart broke at the sight. Whatever had happened to their parents, it was clear it wasn't going to be good news. Tuck then spoke. "Our parents are dead," he said. He took a paw off of Ella and wiped a tear from his eye. Lydia gasped again. Now she knew why the Ella was whimpering and crying when she found her. Tuck continued. "We never actually got to meet our dad. He died when our mom was still pregnant with us. But like Ella said, I have the same name if he did. Mom gave it to me to show how much she loved him and remember him by. And Ella got her name from our grandmother, our mom's mother. Her name was Ella, too." "Your mother sounds like she was a total sweetheart," Lydia told him. Tuck cracked a small smile at the comment. "Yeah, she definitely was. She loved us both more than anything else. She did everything she could to keep us safe." His smile faded and turned back into sadness. Then he choked up at what he was about to say as tears brimmed his eyes again. He wiped them with his paw again and took a deep breath before continuing. "Then, a couple days ago, me and Ella were playing tag in the park. We were having so much fun, until we wandered off too far and ended up in the middle of the street. Before Ella and I knew it, Mom screamed out that there was an oncoming car heading straight for us. Me and Ella couldn't move, we were frozen in fear. It was then that Mom quickly jumped and pushed us of the car's way. We didn't even see what happened to her next, as we landed after she had pushed us. But we did hear the impact of something hitting the car. We turned around and saw our mother laying on the ground." Tuck sniffled as his eyes became misty and his voice started to crack. "Ella and I ran up to her and saw that both of her front legs were broken, and there was blood coming out of her mouth. We both shook her to try and help her up. But..." Tears were now starting to pour from the retriever's eyes as his voice became choked from crying. "But she wouldn't move, and we both knew at that moment that she was gone." He shut his eyes tightly and started to weep silently, his shoulders bobbing up and down with each sob, tears streaming down his face. Seeing the puppy brought tears to Lydia's eyes herself. She couldn't imagine how traumatizing it was for both pups to lose their mother in such a tragic way. Then, Tuck gritted his teeth tightly as a growl began to form in his throat. His eyebrows furrowed as his eyes opened, revealing that his expression of sorrow has now changed to one of anger and hatred. "You know what the worst part about that was?" he asked, his lips curling into a snarl. "The driver who hit our mother didn't even bother to stop and check and see if we were all right." His paws clenched as his anger grew thinking about it. They just kept driving on like they didn't have a care in the world. His growl became louder. "When I find the person that killed our mom, I'm gonna tear them limb from limb. I'll make sure to hurt them as much as they hurt our mother. I'll send them to hell." Tuck was cut off as he felt a paw touch his shoulder. He turned and saw the tear-stained face of his twin sister Ella. Her lip was trembling and she sniffled. "Tuck, please, stop," she pleaded softly, voice cracking from sobbing. "Please calm down, *sniff*. Realizing he had scared his sister, Tuck's anger subsided, and his expression changed into a look of sadness and guilt. He closed his eyes and turned his face away from Ella. He inhaled and exhaled a few times to calm himself down from his tirade. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to go off like that," he apologized, looking up at Lydia. "It's just that, seeing our mother die right in front of us put a lot of trauma and pain on us." He closed his eyes again and choked out a small sob. Tears streamed down his face as he spoke. Sniff we just miss her so much. A tear rolled down Lydia's cheek when she heard the puppies weep. Bless their little hearts, she thought. They lost the most important thing to them, their mom. "Oh, don't worry about it, honey," she said reassuringly. "I know how it feels to lose someone you love. I recently lost my husband." The two puppies gasped. I am so sorry to hear about that," Tuck said, wiping what tears he had left with his paw. "I bet he was a wonderful man." Lydia smiled sadly. "Thank you," she replied. "He really was. I miss him every day." She wiped a tear from her eye. Suddenly, an idea came to Lydia's head. Seeing these two pups living on their own in an alleyway without a mother made her very concerned for the twins' well-being. "Hey. How would you pups like to come live with me?" She gave them a smile. "I've been very lonely without my husband, and it's not safe for you two to be out on the streets alone. You both deserve a nice, loving home, where you can be taken care of and be loved. Would you like that?" Both twins' eyes widened at her offer. You really mean it?" Ella said. Lydia nodded. Really?" Tuck said. Happy tears were now forming in his eyes. "Really?" Lydia repeated. Huge smiles spread across both of the twins' faces. They both let out yips of joy as they ran towards the woman, tears of happiness streaming down their little faces. Lydia kneeled down and held out both of her arms. Both pups jumped into her arms and began licking her face furiously, making Lydia laugh from the tickling of their tongues. The depression the trio had felt began to melt away like an icicle, drip by drip. Each one of them got what they had all longed for, a happy, loving family. End of flashback. From that day on, life had been brighter. They spent each moment together. Every Christmas, Halloween, the twins' birthdays, Thanksgiving. Every single moment cherished between them. Every day, throughout the years, Lydia watched the twins grow from tiny baby pups to beautiful, young retrievers. The love they all had for each other was so strong, that if it were a brick wall, not even a wrecking ball could demolish it. She smiled at the memories. Truly, if she had never found the twins that day, she probably would have died from all the stress and grief from losing Tim. If anything bad were to happen to the pups, she didn't know what she would do. As she neared her home, Lydia noticed something that made her raise an eyebrow in confusion. There was an ATV parked in front of her house, along with a small police cruiser and an ambulance that looked like they were the size for a pup. Both vehicles' lights flashed, the police car, red and blue, and the ambulance, red and yellow. And what was that yellow line in the front yard? Was that police tape? Curious and a little concerned, Lydia slowed down and saw that Tuck and Ella's power split bikes were in the driveway. Lydia's heart dropped a bit as worrying thoughts were running amok in her head. Why were the police and ambulance there? Had something happened to the twins? Did one of them get badly hurt, or worse? Lydia stopped the car and got out, not even bothering to collect the groceries. She walked up to get a closer look at the yellow lining in front of the yard. It was indeed police tape, and on it read 5 words all capitalized. Paw line do not cross. Paw line? Lydia questioned herself in her mind. What did that mean? A realization suddenly hit her. This must be the PAW patrol, she decided. She had never met them before, only knowing about them from Ella and Tuck. But what were they doing here? She hadn't called them for help. What was going on? Lydia was just about to cross the police tape when a voice called out, "Stop." Startled, she turned her head towards the direction of the voice. She saw a German shepherd running up to her. He was wearing a blue police uniform and a black collar with a pup tag of a yellow star on it. Seeing that it was a dog, she realized she had guessed correctly. This was indeed the PAW patrol. But what were they doing at her house? The shepherd stopped when he came up to her. "Ma'am, I'm afraid you cannot cross this line." "It says so on the police tape," he said, pointing his paw at the yellow-lined blockade. His face held a stern look, but Lydia thought she could see a bit of sadness behind the dog's eyes. "But, I live here," Lydia replied, her emotions a mix of confusion and worry. "Why can't I pass?" The shepherd closed his eyes and let out a long sigh. Lydia thought she could hear trembling in his breath when he did. The dog looked up at her with a serious but saddened look before. "Ma'am," he began. Lydia stared back into the pup's eyes. Were those tears? Theirs. The shepherd's voice cracked a bit when he said that. "There's been a crime here. A very gruesome one." Lydia's eyes widened. "CC crime?" She stuttered. "What do you mean?" She silently prayed that whatever happened, Ella and Tuck weren't involved. But what the police pup said next confirmed her suspicions. "There's been 2 fatalities. One being a homicide, the other, a suicide." Lydia knew just who the dog was talking about. She didn't even have to ask who they were. Without thinking, she immediately bolted past the pup toward her front door. She ignored the shepherd's cries for her to stop. She knew that she couldn't stand around and watch. If anything bad happened to the twins, she had to know what went down, and know about it now. Despite being in her 50s, she ran as fast as her legs had ever taken her in her life. She practically burst through her door, not caring that she was out of breath. Instead of seeing the twins greeting her, she saw 2 unknown visitors turn around to face her. One was a Dalmatian pup with a red medical cap and vest, and a boy with spiky brown hair, wearing a vest with the colors red, blue, yellow, and white with a logo of a paw on the front. Another PAW patrol member, she realized. Underneath the vest, he wore a white long-sleeved shirt, despite it being summer. What are you doing in my house?" she stuttered. "Where's Tuck and Ella?" The boy and the Dalmatian glanced at each other, then their faces fell into a saddened expression. The boy then looked at Lydia and explained the situation. "Are you Mrs. Lydia Turner?" he asked her in a serious but somber tone. Lydia nodded. "Yes, I am," she replied. "Who are you?" "I'm Ryder," the boy replied. He pointed at the Dalmatian next to him. "And this is Marshall, the firefighting and EMT pup of the PAW patrol. I'm their owner and leader. I'm pretty sure that Tuck and Ella told you about us, right?" "Yes, I have," she replied, but she was surprised at how young Ryder was. The twins hadn't told her that he was just a boy. She thought he was in his mid-teens or in his 20s. But no, he looked like he was about 10 years old. She didn't care about that right now. She wanted to know what the hell was going on. "Where's Tuck and Ella?" she repeated. Ryder only closed his eyes, sighed, and shook his head sadly. "Ella and Tuck, there." His voice became choked as if he were trying to keep himself from crying. I'm so sorry. They're dead." Lydia felt her heart shatter into a million pieces. Had she heard him correctly? Did B just say that the twins were? No, he couldn't have said that. He was just gaslighting her. He had to be. However, she could see on both the Dalmatian and the boys' faces that they were pulling no such joke. No, she screamed, her voice shrill as tears began to brim her eyes. "Please tell me you're joking?" She waited for the boy to crack a smile. Tell her that this was all just a cruel prank that the twins came up with to scare her, to tell her that he was in on the act, as well. But he continued to stare at her with his crestfallen brown eyes. Lydia couldn't hold it in anymore. She dropped to knees and buried her face in her palms and started to sob loudly. This couldn't be happening. This just couldn't. First she had lost her husband, and now she had lost the two little bundles of joy that brightened up her life. Why did it have to be them? Just why? As she cried, she felt a hand touch her shoulder. She ignored it for a few seconds, then looked up with red, puffy eyes at Ryder. He also had tears running down his face. He had also lost two of his friends. "I'm so sorry," he repeated, trying to keep his voice from shaking from his tears. Lydia sniffled and wrapped her arms around the boy in a tight embrace, in which he responded by doing the same. He closed his eyes tightly as tears streamed down his cheeks, letting the woman sob into his shoulder. Seconds later, Lydia let go of the boy and looked at him before speaking. "W.H. Sniff, where are they?" Ryder turned to Marshall, who then turned to Lydia with a look that could be described as one of contemplating whether he should do the task or not. But instead the Dalmatian sighed and said, "Follow me, ma'am." The pup then walked down the hallway that led to the living room, Lydia and Ryder in tow. As she followed the dog, Lydia looked down at the wooden floor and saw drips of blood going in a straight line that led to where they were going. It made her stomach churn. Once they made it the main room, Marshall stopped and turned to look at his escorts. He then pointed his paw to a big, white, blood-stained sheet on the floor, covering two lumps that were identical to the size of a pup. Lydia stared at the sheet for a few seconds. Just the sight of the red splotches alone made a shiver run down her spine, causing her to tremble and feel like she was going to faint. "This isn't happening," she told herself. "This can't be happening." She wanted to pinch herself, tell herself that it was all just some horrible night terror, to wake up and see that the twins were lying at the foot of her bed, sleeping peacefully. But no matter how hard she tried, she knew that it was not the case. This was reality. "Mrs. Turner," a voice said from behind her. She turned to see that it was Ryder. He sighed. "I'm gonna need you to identify them. We need to know if you can confirm that it is indeed Ella and Tuck." She froze. Identify them? Why did she have to do that? Sure, she wanted to help out the PAW patrol. But a part of her was afraid of what she would see under that sheet. Another part of her wanted to see the twins one last time and say her goodbyes. This was going to be very difficult and traumatizing. However, she mustered up her courage and let out a sigh before saying, "Okay." Slowly, she walked up to the sheet. Her heart was beating so fast, it felt as if it were going to shoot out of her chest. Then, she kneeled down and held out a trembling hand toward the sheet, sweat pouring down her face and mixing with her tears. She hesitated for a moment, stopping her hand from grabbing the sheet. She turned to look at Ryder, who gave a sad nod to tell her to go ahead with the task. Turning her gaze back to the sheet, she inhaled and exhaled a trembling breath. Then, grimacing slightly, her hand grabbed the sheet and she slowly started to lift it. "Oh, my God." That was all Lydia could choke out once she had seen the corpse under that sheet before quickly releasing it from her grasp and covering her face in her palms and sobbed hysterically. The sheet hadn't been fully covered once she had jerked away from it. There, sticking out from the sheet, was a bloody, light blonde paw, lying like a cold rock in the night. The sight of Lydia bawling in complete anguish made Marshall turn around and shut his eyes tightly as he began to cry himself, his shoulders bobbing up and down with each silent sob he let out. Lydia's loud bawling echoed throughout the house. Her babies. Her two precious, little babies were gone. Gone forever. "How did this happen?" she choked out. "Who would do such a terrible thing? Why?" She screamed out that last word. "Well, actually," Ryder told her. There's something I need to show you." He choked up. You're not gonna take this very well at all." Lydia's head rose up from her hands as she looked at Ryder. Tear stains covered both of her cheeks, her eyes red and puffy. What? Sniff. What do you mean? Ryder could only let out a shaky exhale as a response. He then looked down to the right side of his jeans and reached his hand down to his pocket. He pulled a folded-up piece of paper out of it and unfolded it. Here. He held out the paper to Lydia. You might want to read this. His lip was quivering. He sniffled as a tear slid down his cheek. Lydia stared at the paper for a few seconds, then looked up at Ryder, then looked at the paper again. With a trembling hand, she reached out and grabbed it from the boy's hand. She examined the paper. It was a note with handwriting she didn't recognize. The words were sloppily written, but she could still manage to make out the writing on the paper. She slowly read each word to herself. Dear Lydia. First off, you may be wondering how a pup can write. Well, I was writing this while holding a pen in my mouth. That's why the words are jumbled up and such. Second, if you're reading this note, me and Ella are dead. I know it's going to scar you for life when you find our bodies, but there's a reason to why this tragedy unfolded. It was because of me. You may be confused as to why I'm saying this. Let me explain. Ella and I were on a mission with the PAW Patrol as mighty pups to try and stop the ladybird. We had told you about her before. She loves shiny things, and steals whatever shiny thing her eyes land on. This time, she had stolen a very important statue from the museum. It was Mayor Goodway's great-great-great-great-grandpa Grover. We just couldn't let her get away. During the mission, Ella and I came up with different ideas to stop her, but we both started to argue over which idea was better. I know, typical sibling argument. I then came up with the idea where Ella could use her giant powers to block Ladybird's way, while I used my shrinking powers and I would use Ella to jump on the Ladybird without being seen and kick the statue right out of her grasp. However, that totally backfired. Ladybird saw me jumping off of Ella and swatted me down to the ground. This caused Ella to turn and run to save me, giving Ladybird the perfect opportunity to escape. Thank God Ella saved me, but when we saw that Ladybird had gotten away, we got really mad at each other and started yelling at each other. It got so bad that Ryder suggested we both come home to calm down and work things out, and that they would stop the Ladybird themselves. Spoiler, they did, thank goodness. We didn't say a word to each other on the drive back here. When we got back, I tried to make things up with her, but she immediately started screaming at me and blaming me for everything that happened. That got me really angry, and we were shouting at each other once again. We then began trading insults and continued blaming each other. Then she told me that she wished I was never born. It really hurt my feelings, and it made me cry. But also, I felt a rage building up inside of me. I don't know what, but it was a rage I had never felt before. Just something about the way she said that insult really got to me. I then pounced at her and pushed her and made her head hit the wall. She then got scared and begged me to stop, but I hit her in the head with my paw, over and over and over again until I ended up knocking some of her teeth out and breaking her nose. It was like totally different side of me that scared even myself. It felt like I was possessed by some demon or entity and made me attack her. I stopped hitting her and told her how I was always there for her, and how much her insult really hurt me. I then went to strike her again, but she managed to hit me the face, knocking me down and giving her a chance to escape. However, she couldn't run very fast because of the pain I had caused. All she could do was just limp. She tried calling Ryder for, but I managed to catch her and rip her pup tag from around her neck. I stomped on it a few times until it was nothing more than little pieces. She then started to cry and beg for mercy and kept saying she was sorry. But the rage had completely taken control of my body. It felt as if some evil entity had possessed me. All I did was scream at her, while she laid there and cried. I then thought of what she said that sent me into that frenzied attack, and I became even more angry. I know you're going to be shocked at this next part. I bent down and sunk my teeth into her throat and ripped out of a chunk of it. She started gurgling and choking as blood gushed out of her neck. The sight of her struggling to breathe suddenly brought me out of my rage and saw what I had done. The letter ended at that last word. Hands trembling, Lydia turned the paper around to see if there was more writing on the back. There was. I ran over to her and held her head in my arms and told she was going to be okay, and to stay with me. I even apologized profusely. I was crying really hard at that point. However, she just looked at me and said it was too late, then she gave me a sad smile and apologized for insulting me. She then told me to tell you that she loved you and the PAW patrol, and will miss you very much. She then gave me her last words, "Goodbye, bro. I love you." Then she died right there in my arms. I honestly don't know what came over me, but I knew that I just couldn't live with knowing what I had done. I killed my own sister, my own flesh and blood, and I hated myself for it. Hated myself so much that I decided to take my own life. As I am writing this, I have one of your kitchen knives sitting next to me. I'm going to slit my own throat and die a slow and painful death. I know you feel heartbroken and betrayed, and I wish I could say sorry, but what good will that do? It won't bring Ella back, and I know that you won't forgive me, anyway. But could you do a favor for me? Make sure to put Ella's favorite flowers, sunflowers, on her grave after her funeral. She would have loved that. Plus, as for me, I don't deserve a funeral. I already know where I'm going. Just cremate me and scatter my ashes in random locations in the woods so the animals can eat them. I don't care. I just don't want to be remembered as the monster I became. Well, all that being said, I just want to thank you, Lydia, for being a great owner to me and Ella. You made our lives some of the best we've ever experienced since our parents died. And I want to thank Ryder and the PAW Patrol for being great friends. We had a lot of fun adventures with the mighty pups. Goodbye, my friends. I love you all. Tuck. His paw print was stamped under his name. Lydia couldn't believe what she had just read. When she finished reading the note, her hand was clasped tightly over her mouth as she shook uncontrollably. The letter fell out of her hand and floated to the floor. She then collapsed on the ground and sobbed once more. It was then she felt a strange sensation in her chest. It started off as a small tightness, but then it grew tighter and tighter until it became an unbearable pain, a pain so bad, she put her hands over it and clutched tightly. She was breathing rapidly, unable to catch her breath. Ryder took notice of this and began to panic. Oh, my God. Marshall, she's having a heart attack. Get your defibrillators. He screamed to the Dalmatian. Marshall's tear-stained eyes widened at the severity of his owner's voice, and he immediately bolted outside to his EMT truck. Meanwhile, Ryder knelt down and put his arms around the struggling woman. She was now laying on her side, still clutching her chest, her breathing intensifying with each second that passed. Ryder was trying to calmly tell her that she was going to be okay, but his voice was trembling with panic and tears were running down his face. However, to Lydia, his voice sounded like it was miles away. It sounded like he was inside of a dark, hollow cave. She was fading in and out of consciousness with every breath she took, until she let out one long, choked breath, and went silent. No matter how hard Marshall tried to shock her heart back to beating, it was too late. Some say that she died from a broken heart from losing her family. First her husband, now her pups. Her poor heart couldn't handle the grief, and it just gave out on her. Despite Tuck being a cold-blooded killer, the PAW Patrol followed his request by placing sunflowers on Ella's grave at her funeral a couple of days later. Plus, Lydia was buried beside her husband, a symbol that they were reunited not only in death, but in the afterlife, as well. As for Tuck, his body was cremated, and his ashes were scattered in different locations all around Adventure Bay. Even though he committed such an unspeakable atrocity, some people still mourned over his death, while others called him a coward for taking his life instead of taking responsibility for his crimes. Whichever way it was still a somber time for Adventure Bay. Not only did the town lose 3 residents, they lost a kind and caring woman, and 2 heroic twins that fought crime alongside the PAW patrol. And now that they were gone, it would take some time for the town to accept the fact that a gentle, sweet, fun-loving pup would become such a ruthless killer, the fact that one of the twins committed a horrible sin. The end. You've reached